Now, time for McNamara On Money, sponsored by McNamara Financial Services.
Good morning and welcome to McNamara On Money. I'm Alyssa McNamara Reed, a certified financial planner professional with McNamara Financial in Marshfield, Mass. This is a financial talk radio show for people who want to get all areas of their financial life in order, get their kids through college, and live comfortably in retirement. On this show, we will be talking about a wide variety of financial topics. You have to make many important decisions in your life that have to do with money, investments, insurance, mortgages, taxes, estate planning, living your life within your means, and retirement. Our goal is to help you with all of these. We also have lots of great information on our show's website, McNamaraOnMoney.com. You can download podcasts, watch videos, or browse our abundance of written articles on topics related to personal finance. And as always, to find out more about our practice, visit McNamaraFinancial.com. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, relax, and enjoy the show. Good morning. You're listening to McNamara On Money. I'm Alyssa McNamara Reed. I have a full-packed house this morning, so we're going to have to spend a little bit of time going through introductions, but we have a great show planned for you. We're going to be talking about transition periods in life, in particular homes in transition, because we have some real estate professionals here and we also have some attorneys in the house. So I guess let's get started with introductions. Some of these ladies I'm just meeting for the first time. But we have remotely, we have Sharon McNamara with Boston Connect Real Estate. Good morning, Sharon. How are you?
Good morning. Good morning to everybody. So glad that everybody could make it there.
Yep. And so the plan for this morning is that we're gonna be here for a marathon show this morning, so our 2 hours, and then we're gonna go right into talk real estate roundtable with Sharon McNamara for the next hour. So we're gonna have lots of stuff to talk about this morning, but plenty of opinions here in studio, and we'll be all good. We also have Melissa Wallace with Boston Connect Real Estate as well. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good. She was here bright and early setting up all the social media things.
Yeah, so we'll be live on Facebook too.
Great.
We are live now, by the way.
Oh, great. All right, so let's go through some introductions. So we have Amy Hubert Masferrer, Esquire, who's a real estate attorney with Sherman Law. I'll give you guys a moment to give backgrounds and stuff like that, but let me just introduce all of you. Good morning, Amy.
Good morning.
We also have Erin, Nally, Esquire, who's an estate planning attorney with Starboard Legal. Good morning.
Good morning.
And Allison Walsh, Esquire, who's a family law attorney with Walsh Law Office. Good morning.
Good morning.
All right, so I guess, Amy, we'll start with you. Do you guys, I'm just meeting these ladies for the first time, so it's great to, thanks for joining us. Look forward to getting to know you in the discussion this morning. Do you want to just take a minute or so to just a little introduction, if you want to do a background of your practice, your experience, et cetera, whatever you want to share this morning so our listeners can get to know you.
Sure, absolutely. So this is Amy Hubert Masferrer. I'm from Sherman Law. I'm a real estate attorney with over 20 years experience. I focus on all things real estate. And, in addition, I've been contributing lately, kind of focusing on transitional sales as we see a lot of listings come from situations. I, have a certain background in divorce because I am divorced. So life experience helps for sure. But, I really enjoy working with particularly families and trying to get them kind of in the right place after difficult times.
Great. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Allison, would you like to go next?
Sure. Hi, everyone. I'm Allison Walsh. I'm a family law and divorce attorney. My office is in Hingham. I grew up on the South Shore, so I'm very familiar, actually, with even Marshfield. Grew up spending my summers here.
Okay.
And I've been practicing for 20 years at firms in Boston and the South Shore. I've been on my own for about 6 years now. Regularly deal also with, between my divorce practice with real estate and, financial issues. And so hopefully this will be, I'm looking forward to hopefully learning something today as well as teaching somebody something.
Sure, we all will, yeah. And where's your office, Allison?
My office is in Hingham.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And where was yours, Amy?
Hingham. We also have a second location in Plymouth as well.
Okay.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you, Allison. And Erin, how about you?
Good morning. My name is Erin Nally. I am the founding attorney of Starboard Legal. Okay. I'm in a business and estate planning attorney. My office is in Norwell, right at Assinippi Corner. Mm-hmm. I have over 50 years of experience in both private and public sector. And my primary focus now is, like I said, all on business planning and estate planning matters.
Yeah. And how did you ladies meet? Have you known each other for a while, or did you just meet at that class that Sharon was talking about?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So Allie and I actually went to high school together.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But we kind of reconnected because of Amy, who
Yes.
wanted to do this presentation on transitional or life-changing real estate, right?
Okay.
Yeah, right. Yeah,
And so
Erin-
that was how the three of us got connected.
Yes.
And
Well,
So-
we've known each other since we were 14.
It's amazing. 'Cause
Shout out to
Erin-
Notre
I
Dame.
met, I met Erin first through like a networking event, and like we hit it off right away. And I'm like, oh, we're like the same person at this point. And then I was like, I kept hearing about Allison Walsh, and I was trying to find. I get a lot of calls for people who need divorce attorneys. Your name kept coming up. It's excellent. So I'm like, I have to meet this woman. And then I was like, do you guys know each other? And they're like, yeah, we do. So it was fantastic, and it's been a really great to get to know them personally and as well as professionally. So all good things.
I wondered where the topic came from. I know Sharon had mentioned she went to a class and that's where she met you ladies. I wondered where the topic came from. Homes in transition, which I think is an excellent topic, and we can approach it from many different angles. But so you guys have already sort of given a similar talk before.
Yeah, so I was really trying to think about how, I'm very big into education, especially with my realtors. For me, I was seeing where the market was frozen a little bit for a brief time period, though we've seen more inventory. Yay, keep selling. What was going on the market were people who had to sell because of situations. Those transitional sales are more difficult for the realtors for sure. So I was looking for ways to support them to not be afraid of those transactions and to get the right team around them so they had both the legal and sometimes emotional support to kind of support their clients.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my my thought process at that time. I'm always looking to do a different type of class. Obviously, I have some experience in divorce personally and professionally, and so that was important to me.
Yeah. Sharon, anything you want to share before we kind of dive into topics? I mean, this was sort of your idea to put this marathon show together this morning. So
Yeah,
anything you want to
so
share with?
Amy's great about always wanting to help the realtors, and me being the broker owner of a company, I always want my agents learning as well. So anytime she has anything, she always invites us. We adore Amy. Amy actually, Casey actually worked with Amy very closely when she was doing her internship while she was in law school.
Okay.
So yeah, and Amy loved Casey, and Casey loved Amy. So
Well, let's not to live there. Yeah, for sure.
yeah. So Amy had this class, and she had our other two guests here with us. She also had a loan officer, but I just thought, okay, we could make a joke out of it.
Well, that's enough. Yeah.
3 attorneys, a loan officer, 2 real estate agents, and a financial planner.
Yeah.
Like what? So, but honestly, Alyssa, you and I are always trying to do shows too, like when we do our 3-hour marathons. And when I watched them and they taught me so much, I learned a lot that day too. I thought that you would actually be just such a great fit for what they're doing as well. And thinking back to when we used to do financially secure women.
Yeah.
It I felt like all the pieces went together, and it is definitely something that we're seeing a lot more of. I mean, myself, I'd say most of my transactions that I've been doing as of late this year have been estate sales, or not even estate sales yet. Like they're in assisted living, but the parent hasn't deceased yet. I'm seeing a lot of that. So lots of moving pieces to it. So I know we have the three women who can help us with that.
Yeah. All right. Well, I guess let's dive in and start talking about the issues surrounding divorce and transition related to divorce. And I guess just to back it up a little, when I work with divorcees, it's much more common than I would work with the female member of the couple. I don't know what you ladies are seeing, but I was at a conference a week or two ago, and there was a presentation on financial topics surrounding divorce and planning for that, and he had some statistics, and I don't know the exact study or whatever, but there was some survey done not long ago about with divorcing couples, which member of the couple would be more likely to seek, in this particular instance, financial guidance, during and post divorce. Whoa, I almost lost my coffee there, and it's totally full. That would have been a bummer because we're here for a long time. And the statistic was crazy. It was like what percentage of women would seek out financial advice during and post divorce, and it was like 75% of women, would seek out professional advice, and I think it was like 15% of men. And I certainly see that in my practice, where I'm generally I can't recall a situation where I had a man come to me for financial advice specifically post-divorce. I certainly have a lot of male clients, and whether single or married, but specifically during and post-divorce, I'm generally sought out by the female member of the couple. What do you ladies see? Is it common pattern or?
Absolutely. I still think that things fall into kind of traditional gender roles still during marriages, and I consider myself an educated person. That being said, my husband at the time handled the finances, and so they're coming into awareness of what they have to handle and what their planning is, and certainly I think that we tend to see that for a lot of times one person in the couple, and typically it can be the man in a traditional marriage, runs all the bills, runs all the invoices, all of those things, and people don't really have a full understanding of what they have and what they don't have. Yeah. And a common preempt of divorce is people kind of living outside their means, which causes conflict in the marriage. So that can be another kind of reason why there's just not mutual financial understanding between the two parties.
Yeah. Do you find that, Allison? Is it still, you read the statistics about causes of divorce, and financial issues still tend to be a leading cause of couples divorcing?
Yeah, I would say, I guess in my practice, I think financial issues for sure. I see, and this is an unfortunate sort of statement on society, but substance abuse, I think, in the last 10 years or so has really, a lot of our divorces, unfortunately, have some sort of, unfortunately, like alcoholism or something like that component to it. Gambling addictions, and especially, I think, with COVID, too, when everybody was stuck in the house together, one thing, trend that we saw was, I think a lot of people had learned how to sort of coexist by, having a girls' night out once a week, or the guys would go out, and so people were staying married by not spending that much time together, and then when they were suddenly forced to be in the house together for like 2 years straight, that was the straw that broke the camel's back.
Oh, absolutely.
So that was something I had not seen before, and so we're kind of cycling through that now too. To Amy's point about kind of women seeking out advice more during the divorce, I think I do see that. I think especially women that, were traditionally maybe like a stay-at-home mom or something, they oftentimes are really looking for sort of a financial advisor or somebody to help them get on their feet afterwards. I think also the other piece with the divorce is a lot of times in the divorce, both parties might have had the same financial advisor, and then in the divorce, one party keeps the financial advisor. That's not like in the divorce agreement or in the divorce judgment, but sort of maybe it was the husband's buddy or whatever, right? So now if I have the wife as a client, she's kind of coming to me saying, hey, do you have a recommendation? Yeah. Same thing with insurance agents, right? Yeah. It's sort of interesting how in the divorce, the professionals in your life kind of go one way or the other sometimes. And so a lot of times people are looking for referrals post-divorce.
I also think we're going to talk about, part of the subject matter for today is real estate in transition as a result of many things, but divorce being one of them. And when it comes to real estate, if you would think in a traditional marriage where there are children, it seems to me that it's more common that the female member of the couple, the mom, would want to keep the home and keep the children in the home. So then, maybe seeking out advice related to that and affordability of that probably seems to be, I would guess, more common. Can I afford to stay here? What's the impact of that in my life, et cetera? And we can kind of talk all through that. Erin, anything you see or in terms of...
As far as who typically reaches out, on my end, it's typically the woman that would reach out because my work is all directions. Oddly enough, so
yes, right.
Insert joke. But you know what I mean? Like when it comes to estate planning, there's no real instant gratification for it.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? It's sort of like if something happens, then where are the directions that we follow?
Okay.
So usually I will have...
It's planning. Yeah, so it's...
Right.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
Exactly.
And women sometimes are better planners. Not always, but sometimes.
And guardianship,
well,
right?
And
And that's a big concern because if, your backup plans were that the in-laws were going to raise the kids and if someone, if everyone predeceases, suddenly the in-laws are not your in-laws anymore. So, those considerations you have to think about too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk about, we wanted to focus on homes in transition and real estate issues surrounding divorce. So like I touched on a moment ago, it seems to be pretty common that if a divorcing couple has kids, especially young kids, then one member of the couple wants to keep the house. But are you got, maybe Sharon and Melissa could chime in regarding the clients that you're seeing going through divorce. Are they selling the home because they can't afford it, or because they want a life change and a fresh start? I can recall several conversations with particularly females going through divorce and, talking through affordability of keeping the family home. And sometimes it's unrealistic financially, and, or maybe there's a financial sacrifice in the near term, and then they have to pay for it on the back end later, retire later, work harder later, et cetera. And sometimes people are okay with that, and that's a decision that they can make. But, if you think about just most people, most married couple, like dual income families, right, are there. I don't think it's incredibly common that there's enough financial resources that while they were married that they could just afford another home, right? Most couples are just, they're trying to make it work on either, one income or two incomes. And so in a divorce, like the affordability of then just all of a sudden maintaining two homes it's sometimes just the numbers don't work. And that would oftentimes lead to discussions about real estate sales, et cetera, and or how to handle that. So Sharon, do you and Melissa have a lot of clients? Yeah.
So for us, I think that, with having a lot of divorce, and as Allison was saying too, is, we are definitely seeing more divorce because of substance abuse and alcohol and things like that. And I'd say, so I've been selling real estate for 21 years now, that I wonder if the difference is that from what I'm seeing, it's the women are not putting up with it. And I'm not saying that's who's coming to me too, generally, is the women, not the men. So in some cases, the men will as well. But usually the person that's reaching out to me first is, the woman of the relationship. And they're just saying, I'm not dealing with this anymore. And they're okay to do that. There have been some situations, and I'm sure Allison has some stories. And I know all the ladies, especially Amy, has, I told you she might throw a little comedy in there.
Yeah. There's a lot to be had here, for sure.
Hold on. So Amy will get us there for sure. But, some of the terrible situations I see is, if one of the spouses is having an affair or something like that, sometimes I'm pulled in right after that other spouse finds out.
That's an awful time to be pulled in. Emotions running really high. Oh, God, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, really hard. And I have some really vivid memories of sitting at a table, and it's hard. Like whoever it is really upset. I tend to see when it's, when the woman finds out that he had been cheating, she's sobbing at the table. But if it's the man who finds out that the woman is cheating, he's always trying to pull me aside, like, it wasn't me. It wasn't me. It was her. It was her.
Yeah.
It wasn't me.
I was the good guy.
Right.
I'm thinking of a very specific time when that happened. I can remember when this happened.
Yeah. It was, and again, you try to stay neutral. And I think that Allison, you can talk about that too. I think as the real estate agent, and Amy too, all of you actually knowing my role, sometimes it really matters what the divorce is. So I have had situations where, there are restraining orders. So I like the information to be equal, and it works out great for our team because I have Melissa as a team member who's licensed. I have Mary who's licensed as a team member. And it's important for us as a team to always know what the communication is, because I feel like one of them will always try to sneak off, and tell us everything. We like all communication to be together. If they ever say, please don't tell my other spouse this, it puts us in a really bad situation. And Allison can talk more about that too. But with restraining orders, I've had times where I can't even text husband and wife, soon to be exes, in the same text message. So Allison can talk more about that.
Yeah, how often are the attorneys involved in these transactions, before the divorce is final?
Right. So it really, people can kind of sell their house at any point in a divorce. So sometimes people think they have to file for divorce in the courts first. That's not really the case, right? So sometimes I have folks come to me and say, okay, we're getting divorced. We've already put the house on the market. They've, crunch the numbers with their advisor or whatever, and they're just like, neither of us can afford, especially around here, right? I mean, real estate's expensive, so a lot of times they're like, I can't afford the 4-bedroom house. We're both going to have to downsize or whatever it might be. So those usually are a little bit more amicable because they've both kind of come to the conclusion that neither can afford and we're just going to sell. Sometimes, oftentimes folks come to me and say we're getting divorced and one party or the other wants to keep the house. Sometimes they both want to keep the house. Sometimes they can both afford it because now both people work usually, and so sometimes that's an option that maybe 20 years ago that oftentimes we didn't see that. And then we sometimes we have to fight over who's going to keep the house. I find courts are very Solomonic in the sense of they split the baby, right? So if people can't decide who's going to keep the house, I feel like it's sort of a pox on all your houses and the house gets sold a lot of times.
The court would force that. You mean if they can't agree?
Yeah, because the judge isn't going to decide. If both of them have the financing and they both can afford it, like how do you decide who gets to keep the house, right?
Okay.
And I think more and more, too, we're getting away from the traditional idea of, the stay-at-home mom and they would stay in the house with the children. With everybody working, we see so much more and more like a 50-50 co-parenting. Oftentimes there might be a nanny or, right? I mean, the grandparents are involved, right? It's like it takes a village now. So it's like, how do you decide? There's not just sort of a presumption of, okay, well, the kids will stay in the house because mom's going to be there. The parents might, dad might have them more time. Who knows? So so oftentimes if they can't agree on anything, oftentimes that's when stuff starts to get sold.
And is it common that I know that post-divorce, like one spouse can still have ownership in the property? Is it more common to structure it like that, or is it more common to just like split the equity and one buys out the other? If there's resources, that's easier. But like, how often are there the cash resources for the buyout? Oh, hold on. We might not have time to finish this, but we'll finish it after the break. Well, this is an interesting time to talk about that because with interest rates so high and one spouse having to cash out, refi to buy out the other spouse, this is a crazy, horrible time to do that with interest rates where they are now. So I just was wondering, like, maybe it was more common in the last decade or so for cash out, refi buyouts, but I wonder if this interest rate environment is going to change that, and then one spouse, retains equity in the home post-divorce. Like, is that common at all for equity, for ownership to still be joint post-divorce?
It's not that common. What we usually see when we see that, and especially if it's ordered by the court, the idea is usually to get the kids through high school. Okay. So it's a short-term fix. To kind of jointly, if one party or the other can't buy out, and you've got a kid that's in the 10th grade already, you don't want to uproot them if they've been in that school system. Let's, for 3 years kind of, for lack of a better word, suck it up and cooperate and continue to own this property together, get the kid to graduate, and then figure it out at that point. Okay,
maybe we'll continue on that after the break, but we just, we have to take a short break, ladies. You're listening to McNamara on Money. I'm Alyssa McNamara Reed. Full house this morning. Sharon McNamara with Boston Connect Real Estate, Amy Hubert Masferrer, real estate attorney with Sherman Law, Erin Nally, estate planning attorney with Starboard Legal, Allison Walsh, family law attorney with Walsh Law Office. We're talking about transitions in life, homes in transition, stuff surrounding divorce, and we'll get into death, etc. We're just taking a quick break, and we'll be right back.
Are you ready to get organized? Let's consolidate those old accounts and make sure your investment strategies are appropriate. This is Kirk Reed, a certified financial planner with McNamara Financial in Marshfield. Find out more at McNamaraFinancial.com.
This is Mike McNamara. We think that your financial advisor should be a certified financial planner practitioner. This is the gold standard for financial advisors. We also think your advisor should be a fiduciary and always act in your best interest. That would describe Justin, Alyssa, Kirk, and myself. We are a family business. When it comes to your money and financial affairs, we think our family can help your family. In Marshfield, call us at 781-834-2010 or McNamaraFinancial.com.
Hi, this is Alyssa Reed with McNamara Financial in Marshfield. Your investment strategy should largely be determined by the amount of time you have before needing the money. If you are aggressively invested, time is your friend when it comes to your portfolio recovering from this scary stock market. If you need your invested money soon, it should have been conservative to begin with. If you're not sure how your money is invested, I'd be happy to offer my opinion. 781-834-2010.
Hi, this is Mike McNamara. How do you find a financial advisor that you can trust and will take good care of you? Not easy. We would suggest that you listen to McNamara on Money here on WATD Saturday mornings at 8 and Sunday mornings at 7:30. It's an easy way to get to know a family of 4 financial advisors who are also certified financial planner practitioners. Call us in Marshfield at 781-834-2010 or McNamaraFinancial.com.
Hi, this is Alyssa McNamara Reed. Bear with me as we need a little compliance disclosure. In our practice, we give financial advice to our clients. We know their financial situation in detail before doing so. That's generally not the case with callers we speak to on the show. We can't give truly meaningful financial advice because we don't know the detailed financial situation of the caller. We just met. Any suggestions we make to callers are generic in nature and meant to steer the caller in the right direction. Callers should check with their own financial professionals before implementing any suggestions that we may make. At times on this show, we talk about investments and investment performance. Investment returns are not guaranteed, and past performance does not guarantee future results. And we're back. You're listening to McNamara on Money. I'm Alyssa McNamara Reed. We're talking about transitionary periods in life this morning, homes in transition, real estate discussions surrounding transitions in life, divorce, etc. Maybe we'll get into second marriages, death of a spouse or a parent and things like that. I don't know if we're going to have time to get to all this stuff because 3 hours might not be enough for all of us to get through. There's a lot of opinions flying around.
Let's try the 3 hours first, and then we can see who's after our show.
I was going to say, is 3 hours enough to cover a lifetime of events? Right.
We're still going to be on divorce 3 hours from now.
Let's wrap up this divorce in 3 hours. Could you imagine?
All right, so I'll do briefly intros again. So we have Sharon McNamara and Melissa Wallace from Boston Connect Real Estate. BostonConnect.com.
Yeah.
What's your website? I was going to give out website.
BostonConnect.com.
BostonConnect.com. We have Amy Hubert Masferrer, who's a real estate attorney with Sherman Law. What's your website, Amy?
It's actually TeamShermanLaw.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then we have Allison Walsh, who's a family law attorney with Walsh Law Office. And what's your
It's AllisonWalshLaw.com. Allison with 2 L's, 1 I.
Okay. Do some people have 2 I's in Allison?
I've seen Allison spelled. I've seen it spelled with a C and a Y, and
Real estate attorney, I can say there are many spellings.
Yes, it was a popular 70s name with no direct spelling.
And then we also have Erin Nally, who's an estate planning attorney with Starboard Legal. And
StarboardLegal.com.
Starboard Legal. Is it? I never knew if it was Starboard or Starboard.
Well, now you know.
Because I don't have a boat.
Aren't you glad you did the show? Now you know.
Yeah. Starboard?
Starboard.
Like bird? Like Starboard, even though it's spelled differently? Okay, got it. All right, we were talking a little bit about, we were talking about, when one spouse wants to keep the family home, a divorcing couple, and if let's say one of them can agree to keep the family home. You mentioned, of course, sometimes they can't agree, maybe nobody wants it, et cetera. But if someone wants it, and there's significant equity in the home, and we were talking about how, if there aren't other cash, non-retirement cash resources for one spouse to buy out the other spouse from the home, cash out refinance would generally be an option if the spouse can qualify for the higher mortgage, et cetera. Having said that, it's a terrible time to cash out refinance with interest rates double or triple what someone probably has on their existing mortgage. And so I was just wondering, how common it is for a couple to for one member of the couple to delay their equity buyout of the property. It seems to me that it's probably pretty common, and you were saying maybe just for a short period of time to get the kids through school. It does limit the other spouse's options, right? If that spouse doesn't have the cash resources to then buy their next home, maybe then they're renting for a period of time, or can we talk through that a little bit in terms of the stress on an already stressful situation as a result of that, or what are options that you throw out there to people to handle that?
Yeah, so I think typically when we sort of see the concept of one party wants to do a cash buyout or a cash out buyout, the court likes to sort of keep a short leash on that unless there's some extenuating circumstance, like I said before the break, the child in high school that's only got a couple years left or something. Yeah. So usually what we'll see is sort of time frames. Can you qualify in 90 days? Can you qualify? If you get rejected in 90 days, then try again in another 90 days or whatever. You don't typically see more than about a year or so. Unless the parties agree. If the parties agree and they say, hey, we've occasionally people do get along. something, right? And they might be able to creatively figure something out. But, kind of without some sort of agreement. And again, when we have an agreement like that, oftentimes it does involve the financial planner who sits down and says, this just doesn't make a lot of sense. But if people are kind of at loggerheads about stuff, it's usually you're talking about a year or so to kind of watch the rates. So in the last year, that's been a problem because I've had divorces that when they started, we figured, okay, cash buyout, and now people can't qualify with the interest rates because it was going to be tight, at 3%, and now there's no way. Right? Yeah. Right. So that's tough. And then you see houses having to get put on the market sometimes because of that.
It's a terrible.
Alyssa, that's one of the things too. I was texting Melissa too. One of the things, it's interesting because we've been talking about such low inventory lately, right? Yeah. So this is like an issue. So people would think, if you're working with a lot of divorced couples, at least you're bringing on more inventory. Well, it's the opposite. Now we're selling one house and we have two people looking for housing. Right. Mm. So it's really impacting, with low inventory. There's so many factors that are impacting it, but that makes it even a little more difficult, especially when we are thinking about the rates, you're thinking about multiple offers. And Amy, you see this, like the end part of this, right? Like people are paying $100,000 in some cases. Right. We saw up to $200,000 over asking. Right. So it's hard to do in a divorce situation, right?
Yeah. Right. And that's another thing. I mean, if you have one party who's saying like, look, let's maximize the value out of the house right now. We're at all-time highs for purchase price. Yeah. But then you have the two parties who have to also purchase with high interest rates and low inventory, kind of navigating through that. So, we've seen people who have had more growth in the equity of their house than perhaps they have been contributing to the retirement, which I know you'll speak on. So we don't have those tradable assets anymore. When the court is looking at something, they're saying, okay, well, you have $500,000 in equity. You want to hold on to the house. What's the other asset that's going to be the trade-off for that? Yeah. And those other assets haven't had the same sort of boom growth. Yeah. So it's really a challenging time, and really, like I said, getting the right team to be able to make decisions, kind of keeping level heads prevailing, hopefully, to make the best decision for the family at this point. Because like we said, it might say like, okay, yes, you can get the highest value, but now you're both out looking at housing market, and you're going to lose some of that value. Yeah. You have to realize if there's children involved, the parents' assets are what's going to be passed on, which I know Erin will talk about. Do we want to liquidate an asset that's going to hold more value than another? And thinking about that long term.
Yeah. How creative, I guess, Amy, this one would be just directed toward you. Allison, how creative do people get in terms of dividing assets? Like, I guess what I mean by that is, like, let's say there's $500,000 in equity in the home, and the only other asset is, $500,000 in a 401k. So there's no cash for a buyout, and maybe in cash out refi doesn't, make sense in this environment, this interest rate environment. Like, in my mind, I've helped some amicable couples, I've helped them with number crunching through divorce and things like that. And when I'm working with one member of a couple, of course, I can only approach it from their perspective and what might be fair to you and all that. But I kind of like, a retirement account for someone who's 40, is very different from equity in a home. It's very different from cash. Of course, there's the tax consequences to consider, after tax value versus before tax, value or market value. So I'm just wondering, like, how creative will the courts allow people to get? Like, can someone say in that example, I'll keep the house, he can keep the 401k, and as long as the after-tax values are similar, does the court really care about stuff like that? Or is there someone at the court being like, no, what's your tax bracket? Is there any judgments in that regard?
The short answer on that is no. They're not really crunching tax numbers at the courthouse. I can honestly say that.
Down to the penny.
As the daughter of an accountant, I've got to say I don't like doing that either. I usually bring in outside accountants. So I mean, I think when you have $500,000 in a house and $500,000 in a retirement, if one person walked away with the house and one person walked away with the retirement, I can't think of any judge that would blink at that.
Okay, well, that's not equitable at all.
Right. Well, that was what I was
going to say.
Not at all. I was going to say I wouldn't, depending on which side I'm representing, I might not advise that, right?
Right.
But yeah, we don't. So I mean, from your perspective, Melissa, you're probably doing sort of, you're looking at the retirement and like projecting it out, going, well, if you retire at 65, how much are you going to have? If you can, right? The court's not doing that. They're just looking at the numbers and they're saying 500. On its face, what you might hear from a judge would be, well, 500 of a house and 500 of retirement today are not exactly the same.
Yeah.
Because with retirement, if you cashed out today, obviously you're not getting 500. Right. You've got taxes, penalties, the whole 9 yards. So those are the kinds of comments you get back, as opposed to somebody sitting there crunching it and projecting it out and saying, well, if we invested this at this rate, nobody's really doing that. So people that are smart getting...
I would be like, I'll come in with my spreadsheets and...
because you love numbers. You're just like, and you owe me 13 cents.
People
exactly what it's like, Elizabeth.
People that are smart sit down and do those kinds of things, but,
Well, she is very smart.
Right. And I think, part of it, too, is... there's sort of some, I think folks with, equity and things and people that have assets oftentimes do have an advisor and accountants and things around them. So sometimes that's a little bit easier. We come in with a team already in place. For folks that kind of have a house and a 401k, a lot of times they don't have, that pension through their job. They might not have those outside people that, that they're working with on a regular basis. So, and they might not have the resources too, right? So, I mean, sometimes we're sort of resource strapped in terms of like how many people can we hire to look at this case, right? You have to kind of get a budget at the beginning of, how much do you want to spend on this?
So obviously this is, exponentially easier when the members of the couple are cooperative, right, and can agree on things. And I guess, do you do mediation at all too?
I do, I'm a certified mediator. As well.
I guess I was just curious, like how, like if a couple agrees on, a division of assets during the divorce, I guess my question was, is a judge like making calls on that, or if there's an agreement, they're going to approve the divorce and because the parties agree? I mean, is it? Yeah.
If you have two attorneys,
it depends.
It really depends. It has to. So that's
a good attorney answer.
It depends. I know. I was gonna say, if you have two lawyers on the case, I feel like there's usually a pretty good chance it's getting approved. Because they figure, everybody's had legal advice. Everybody's, sat down and at least run the numbers. The standard to get a divorce agreement through and get it approved is that it's fair and reasonable, basically.
Yeah.
So what does that mean, though, right? And that means different things depending on how long the marriage is. So 7-year marriage, what's fair and reasonable might be that if somebody owned the house before the marriage, they're going to walk away with the equity that they had before, right? That might be considered fair and reasonable because it was a short marriage. A lot of times in a short marriage, people don't even end up joining accounts now. We see, people are only married a couple of years. They just keep their own retirement. They keep their own checking account, and that's, you kind of walk away. What's fair in a, 12-year marriage with a couple of kids? That's where we start to see 50-50 on the house, 50-50 of the retirement that was accumulated during the marriage, but maybe there's a carve out if there was a significant amount before, right? And then once you get up into like the 18, 19, 20 plus, forget it. That's 50-50 down the line. It really doesn't. I mean, if you're really far off of that one way or the other, I mean, a few percentage points, but you're very rarely going to see something that, for some reason a judge is like, oh, well, this is a 25-year marriage and one party really should get 70%. I mean, that would be extraordinary. So,
Erin, let's loop you in a little bit on these discussions. Like, divorce is very common.
Hold on one sec. I have questions.
Oh, are you here, Sharon? I thought you were in Edgartown on your boat.
I'm still here, but we didn't make it to Edgartown because of the rain.
Oh, you didn't? Okay.
No, but we are still on the boat. Yeah, we're just down at our marina. But anyways, I had a couple questions for Allison because, and a few that will probably stem over to Amy too, is at what point do you, when they're looking for the value of the house, right? So at what point do you suggest that people are doing that? And do you ever see that as a sort of a conflict because they're like, I'm not using her because she likes you better? At what, if they can't agree, do you suggest somebody? And then Amy, at what point do you think it's important for you as the real estate attorney to come in, because your role a lot of times is like as they're under agreement already? Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I guess the first question was if they can't agree on the value of a house, Sharon, how do we handle that? Sure. So oftentimes at the beginning of a case, both sides will get a CMA, right, with competitive market analysis, which is sort of typical. You can call your favorite real estate agent and have them run some numbers and kind of give you an idea of what the house is worth. CMAs are useful, right, to sort of start the process and think about, is there going to be a cash out buyout, or are we going to sell, or whatever. But if things get contentious and you end up having to go to court, the courts don't really put a lot of credibility into the CMAs. I mean, the numbers usually aren't that far off, but they want a certified appraisal. So if you're going to end up, let's put it this way, if people aren't agreeing on prices out of the gate, the first step would be to see if you could agree on getting, a joint person, right? Somebody that you both agree to do an appraisal of the house, and that will be the number.
Okay.
Sometimes we can't even agree on that. So sometimes we have two independent appraisers go in, and then we have a battle of the appraisers. And that can be, it can be everybody sits down and kind of like maybe splits the baby and comes up with a number in the middle. And sometimes we end up putting the appraisers on the stand and trying to pick apart what they did and the comps.
Wow.
And then we let the judge decide what the number is. And
what's an appraisal these days? $400 or $500, or is it more?
No,
Has inflation crept up on me? And
it ranges. I've seen anywhere recently from like 500 up to on a single family home like 800, and then if you're talking commercial property, it can get into the thousands.
Okay, yeah. What was the second part of that question? When do we loop in Amy, the real estate attorney?
Yeah. And also, too, if we could hit upon, what about people who don't get married? Because there's a lot of people that do that, too. So they're not married, but they've been together for 20 years. So maybe we can hit upon that.
Right. We can definitely talk about like cohabitation agreements and things to think about with that. So, to your question, when should I get involved? For me, I always want to get involved the sooner the better. If they've agreed on an agent and they're moving forward with marketing, it sometimes helps to kind of bring me in to kind of like seal that deal, because typically in these situations, the realtor's coming in, there's some relationship with one party more than the other, right? It's not unusual. So if I can kind of come in and be like, look, I represent both of you, we can talk about the challenges of that. That sometimes gives them some peace of mind to move forward with the transaction, creating a little bit more neutrality in that regard, because they're kind of meeting me at the same time, and that's very important for me, is that I'm meeting them at the same time. I'm not having one call and then being like, oh, your wife reached out to me, I want to know if that. I like to be introduced at the same time, have conversations, let them know that, my job is to represent both of them through this transaction. And what that means is that I'm not going to be sharing information that don't tell me anything that I can't tell the other person.
Right.
And for lack of a better word, because I have the attorney hat on and they know that I have certain oaths that I have to, sometimes that settles them down a little bit. So it can be beneficial to the agent as well, for sure.
It's interesting that you just said that when you are reaching out, or somebody reaches out to you, or you reach out to that person. I know, at least with Sharon and Mary, a lot of the times they're the ones doing the introduction with the attorney. So if they don't already have an attorney, Sharon will give a list of Sharon and Mary will give a list of attorneys and just say, these are the ones that we generally work with.
Right.
And once they're like, okay, yeah, we'll go with whatever. Usually we'll go with whatever you suggest, because you've been in this business for over 20 years. And Sharon and Mary usually do the introduction. So it's interesting that you said that the people usually reach out to you.
Yeah, or I'll have perhaps that name has been given to them. Yeah. One person reaches out sooner than the other. So I love
it to get a leg up on the other one.
It can be.
That would be me. I'd be like, hi, are you awake at 4 o'clock in the morning?
Exactly. And listen, everyone has their own divorce story. I always joke that I have my own. I've printed pamphlets. I can hand it out. You guys can review it at your leisure. And it is a story that you carry with, and I'm sensitive to that. Everyone has their own experience in their marriage, and there is going to be that venting. There's going to be that. And, in those situations, you have to listen, not land. You can't be like, well, I don't really care about that, because no one feels good about that, right? But, you're constantly redirecting. Well, let's talk about, as I say, you're going to Oprah it. You're going to be like, well, let's talk about how we're moving forward. Let's talk about how, this is the opportunity for you to kind of get a restart. Obviously, this seems like, you're not in a good position there now. Let's get you into a good position, and kind of trying to pivot without saying, I hear you, sister.
Oh, don't you worry.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm holding your hand through this.
Yeah, as you are sitting there are moments when you ought to be like, I get it.
What a dog.
Yeah, exactly, right? Let's, but that isn't your job. Yeah. Your job is, and once you realize to them that the most important thing, and sometimes because I've gone through this process, I can speak to that. The most important thing at the end of the day is that you leave us as whole as possible with your two legs under you. And that's my job. And, that's my hope. So, kind of redirecting that to the future. The emotions only escalate things for sure.
When a couple is getting divorced, I guess my question would be for you is, they want to sell, they both want to sell, but is it ever really suggested, like, depending on when they purchased the home, to go back to the agent that they used because they've already both worked with that person?
Yeah, we see that. Sometimes that's the person that they can agree upon.
Yeah.
And sometimes that can get a little dicey too, because oftentimes we go to family friends, right? So sometimes it's, sometimes we specifically don't want that because maybe it was the brother-in-law of somebody that sold them the house, and now that's, that's enemy territory, right? Now that's the other side of the family. But if it's somebody, what I've seen that has worked really well is if it's somebody that was the original agent that, maybe was a neighbor and sort of doesn't have a dog in the fight, for lack of a better word, and they're like, oh, we really like her. We still, we both trust her. That can actually be a huge game changer, because if you've got that independent person, even if they don't trust each other, and even if they don't really, maybe even have full faith in the lawyers sometimes, because there are days where they're, everybody's a very high emotion, that, whoever, your realtor is can be that person that can be the calming influence and can get it over the line.
Allison, sorry, it's hard for me to just jump in here and I cut everybody off. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, Sharon.
My question too is, a lot of times I'll have people, if money is sort of tighter and I say, well, I want to introduce you to Amy. She's a real estate attorney. There's always somebody who's like, well, we're going to agree to use one of our divorce attorneys. Mm-hmm. Like, do you ever let them know that that's probably not a good idea? I mean, because not all divorces are terrible, but
the answer is yes.
Oh, you know, because I don't like working with divorce attorneys for real estate.
Right. No, because we don't know what we're doing, right? I mean, and I actually say that, like, as I graduated law school in 2004, so that was the height of the real estate refi boom, right? And so that's what I was going to do. Like, my 2003, my summer internship was real estate, and we were all going to make a fortune, right, doing real estate. And then I did it for summer, and I learned that I hated easements, and I never wanted to do them again. So there is a reason that I do what I do, and I don't do real estate. So I send folks that are dealing with real estate transactions to people like Amy that do understand easements and know what they're doing. So
I think it's interesting, Amy, what you said a little bit ago regarding you sometimes represent both members of the couple, and obviously you do that, Amy, through when you're working as a mediator, and obviously for estate planning as well, Erin. I think, and I've represented, and of course I work with a lot of couples, and then even through divorce can, work with members of a couple and be impartial and represent both sides. And I actually think, I don't know what your experiences are, but I think that is like the best situation, because everything is right on the table. Like, communication is, I think, better when when there's not side conversations with one member of the couple. It just seems to me like it's a better situation. There's really nothing being hidden, right? There's no, like I said, side conversations. I think communication is really important through stressful situations, especially a divorce. And so, what are your experiences like? Do you often represent both members of a couple, or is it, I'm sure it's a mixed bag, but do you have any stories of great experiences where, where you're representing both and the communication, helps get through a really tough time? I mean, it just seems to me like that's the way to go.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I do represent both, because I'm very limited to my role. My role is to get the property sold legally to the the buyer. Yeah. They are typically supported by their own divorce attorneys, and I am communicating with those divorce attorneys in the moments of conflict. Yeah. So sometimes, if I can get them focused on this individual asset and maximizing the value out of it and moving forward, that, I'm not navigating the entire divorce. But, I just had a situation where, I did represent both parties. And this kind of speaks a little bit to the real estate agent. One of the things that we run into sometimes is the relationship building. Because one person is typically in the house, the realtor develops more of a relationship with that person, because that's how they're scheduling they're scheduling viewings, open houses, all those things. So typically the other partner is feeling on edge about that. So I'm trying to settle that, to say, like, look, here's the agreement. But it can get contentious when we're dealing with, I just had a case where there was a restraining order. I have to schedule when the spouse is returning to the property to empty out their property. And there's, you can have some contention where, the day before they'll say, I'm not signing, he/she, because I feel like I'm being very gendered and I'm trying to be very neutral here. He/she is not getting a dime. Or if I'll get into fights where it's like she's been living there, he's been living there for the past 6 months, so she's paying the electrical bill in full, or he. So then I have to go back to the divorce attorneys and say, what does the agreement say? What was the understanding during that, and try to level that ship. So even though I represent them in this individual transaction, and that can give them comfort and a neutral person, also not to say this, Allison, it's more cost effective for me to do that. And,
sure, yeah.
And she'll
100%.
be the first person to say, like,
Well, mediation is way more cost effective than having separate attorneys as well. Yeah,
right.
I mean, cooperation.
So, when I'm selling a property, it's a flat fee that I'm charging them, and they're used to being billed by the hour.
Right.
So, and often when I remind them that when I'm reaching out to their attorney is because they can't reach a decision, they're going to be billed for that.
Right.
All of a sudden, kind of people come back to the table. So I'm like, let's be a little bit more reasonable. And I do have to have tough conversations. In the most recent transaction, the gentleman was saying, "I'm not moving anything out. I'm not doing anything," and then I had to remind him that there was a court order to do so.
Yeah.
So did he want me to reach out to the divorce attorneys to get this resolved? And then he kind of realized and had that come to Jesus kind of moment. So I do it with love.
Yeah.
But it can take a little bit of a strong arm, which or just kind of a note of reason to kind of bring cost
effectiveness is a huge point. I mean, is mediation really common these days, or?
I mean, I think it's becoming more common, but most of my practice is still, I would say, is still litigation, even if it's amicable, right? So there might be that both sides have lawyers and we sit down and we work everything out, but there's not a mediator involved per se.
Okay.
I actually used to work at a firm that we sort of tried to really focus on mediation, and one of the partners there was sort of the godfather of mediation in Boston. So I have good background in that, but for some reason there's still people haven't sort of really gelled onto that, I think, as much as they could, and it is a really
too
cost
emotional
effective.
sometimes. Just too emotional. All right, we're going to take a break in a couple minutes, and then I want to loop you and Erin and talk about the estate planning, like in light of the fact that divorce is so common, and then maybe estate planning at post divorce and how things change, or maybe you're being looped in during divorce, so let's loop you in after the break. But did you have something to add before?
I was just something that you said, like, popped into my head. It's usually when we see how bad, or if the divorce is not going too well, it's usually the closer it gets to closing, especially with final walkthrough. So sometimes we go through a house, if we're the listing agents, the day before to make sure, like, hey, tomorrow's closing day, we're going to make sure that everything's out, and whoever has been living in the house, absolutely nothing is gone, or they purposely leave the home and not in great condition, and that's when we really need to, like, bring in every attorney and just be like, okay,
absolutely, I have some definite war stories for that.
All right, hold that for after the break. Hold that for after the break. You're listening to McNamara on Money. I'm Alyssa McNamara Reed. Check us out at McNamaraFinancial.com or McNamaraoftheMerrimack.com. You can also find our podcast on your podcatcher, McNamara on Money. Joined this morning by Amy Masferrer, real estate attorney, Sherman Law, Erin Nally, estate planning attorney, Starboard Legal, and Allison Walsh, family law attorney with Walsh Law Office, and Sharon McNamara and Melissa Wallace of Boston Connect Real Estate. Is literally a round table on a square table this morning. We're just taking a quick break. We'll be right back.